Starvac looked at his tablet and sighed. He put the tablet down and contemplated the simple message on it. This was it. After all the shenanigans of the last couple of days, it was finally time to reveal the dungeon's crystals' existence to the rest of the world. Oh, he knew some organizations and nations had to have gotten their hands on his reports. He had faith in his colleagues. Well, most of them at least. But given the abundance of guild halls and guild masters, it was almost certain that someone had leaked the information, whether accidentally or in exchange for a favor or a payoff. That wasn't even counting the possibility that the communication network of the guild's leadership could have been compromised, or that more conventional espionage techniques could have gotten hold of the information. But this would make it official. This message, sent to every guild representative at every court, ruling council, and senate on the planet, would proclaim the existence of a new dungeon. Usually he would have preferred to wait until he had a firm presence established there, but it wasn't an option. Thanks to Alcarios, he was fairly sure he'd have an expedition up and running before anyone else. But, quite frankly, hiding a newborn dungeon's existence was always tricky at best, and it was outright impossible in the current context. Darthar was too big a trade hub to have a guild expedition of the magnitude required to establish a survivable presence in the wastelands not be put under intense scrutiny. While the dungeon would flourish eventually, it would still stay a deserted hellscape for a few months, depending on how proactive the local population would be at terraforming the land and reclaiming the wastelands. Anything affecting the flow of trade was too vital not to investigate. And that train of thought brought him to the next point, that, in this case, withholding the information could be actively dangerous to the guild's reputation and standing. Dungeons were always an important affair, but this was much more than that. Link dungeons, they were called. Dungeons that bridged the wastelands, separating entire chunks of a continent, with said bridge being called a link. They'd always been massive hotspots for conflict and trade, but they were rare, very rare. After all, they usually happened only once or twice for every continent, depending on the size. He sighed again and leaned over his desk, and before he could think to stop himself, pressed the send button. Wait, seriously? Why can't I just create some out of thin air? I have no idea. I don't make the rules. Alexandra shook her head and looked at the wall. A wall currently made out of iron ore, which was rather the problem. She was, with Amelia and Jared, inside one of the portions of the original tunnel system that she had severed from the rest of the dungeon when making her redesign. Right now, it was connected to the workshop through a long tunnel she had dug up mere minutes ago. So, let me sum this up. I can create a regenerating deposit of ore mixed with stone, any ore I come across, which will regenerate over time by literally regrowing for an absurdly small mana upkeep. But I can't just create the same quantity of loose ore? I mean, no, I can't. It's just, 10 times as pricey? And creating pure ore costs even more per weight. That about sums it up, yes, the vampire girl said, nodding. Although the pure ore compared to mixed ore price per actual weight of metal apparently changes depending on the ore. It's closer to 1,000 times more expensive for mithril, for example. Alexandra looked at Amelia and pinched the bridge of her nose. Sometimes the quirks of her dungeon nature gave her headaches, and she wasn't physically supposed to have them anymore. Or maybe she was. Did dungeon cores have some version of aspirin? She shook herself slightly. This wasn't the time to go on a tangent. The problem at hand was key to her plans. Apparently, she wouldn't be able to just create loose piles of ore for her golems to throw into a furnace. She needed to actually mine it. That could prove problematic.